The Fantastic Four is without a doubt one of Marvel's best movies in recent years. And it was about time, right? Besides being a great film, it's packed with subtle details and jaw-dropping Easter eggs hidden across several scenes. You probably missed most of them. For instance, when Johnny and Ben are in the kitchen just moments before Sue and Reed reveal that they're expecting a baby, you can spot the Human Torch eating a bowl of cereal. What some fans didn't notice is that the cereal box actually features the cover art from the third Fantastic Four comic issue, released back in December 1961. In fact, the whole movie is set in the 1960s, which was the golden era for the superhero team, originally created by Stan Lee, Marvel's most iconic figure, though not the only mind behind it all. One memorable scene where the team battles a monster erupting from the street is an exact live-action recreation of the cover from the very first Fantastic Four comic book. And right around that same era, in 1967 to be exact, Hanna-Barbera Studios, the creators of the Flintstones and Yogi Bear, teamed up with Marvel to produce an animated Fantastic Four series. That exact cartoon is what's playing on the TV in the background during one early scene, as the movie introduces the characters before their upcoming appearance on a fictional television show. And these are just a few of the many references and Easter eggs that pop up in Marvel's brand new Fantastic Four movie, so buckle up because we're about to blow your mind. Even in the movie's opening sequence, there's a bunch of cool hidden references. Take the moment when Johnny puts out a fire, for example. You'll notice the Human Torch greeting a squad of firefighters. What's awesome is that two of those firefighters, right up front, are actually played by Jay Underwood, who portrayed Johnny in the original 1994 Fantastic Four movie, and Michael Bailey Smith, who played Ben in that same 1994 version. His grumpy expression during the scene is a nice nod to his original role. And just a little later in that same intro sequence of the 2025 film, you can actually see all four of the original 1994 cast members who played the team. And if you've never heard of the 1994 movie, don't worry, you're not alone. We hadn't either. That was during a rough time financially for Marvel, when they sold the film rights to a company known for producing low-budget horror movies. But there was a deadline to get the movie made, so with a tiny $1 million budget, they filmed it. In the end, it never even made it to theaters, thanks to moves pulled by Sony and Marvel itself. In other words, it's like the movie doesn't exist, but it does, and it's actually referenced in the two scenes we mentioned earlier. And when you stop to think about it, it's almost like every 10 years, there's a brand new reboot of the superhero franchise, always flip-flopping between a terrible movie and a great one. First, we had that cringeworthy film from around 1994-1995. Then came the all-time fan favorite from 2005, which got a sequel in 2007. And in 2015, we got that awful version starring Michael B. Jordan, who thankfully made a huge comeback in the MCU as Killmonger in Black Panther. And now we've got First Family, which is actually really good. In another moment, we see Johnny saving a little girl from being crushed by a massive metal beam. Well, that little girl just so happens to be the real-life daughter of the film's director, Matt Shakman. Yep. Want to get your kid into a superhero movie? Just direct a Marvel film under Disney. Easy. Speaking of that little actress, when Johnny hands her over to her mom, you might notice she's holding a small Thing action figure. That's a clear callback to the 2005 movie, where we see Captain America, Chris Evans, mocking Ben for getting a fan-made toy version of himself. Seriously though, I really wanted that toy when the movie dropped. Did you? If you care about animal rights, you are probably confused or shocked by that early scene where Mr. Fantastic straight up kicks an orangutan into the freezing Hudson River. But if you listen closely, the narrator mentions the Red Ghost and his super apes. That scene was meant to introduce him, and the character was supposed to be played by none other than John Malkovich, who even filmed a scene with the main cast. Unfortunately, his scenes were cut so the movie wouldn't run too long. According to the director, this was one of the hardest decisions he had to make. What's really interesting about this villain, and something most people like me probably don't know, is that his name actually comes from the Soviet Communist Red. That's because the villain was a Russian scientist during the Cold War era, who recreated the same experiment that gave the Fantastic Four their powers. But he used it on 3 of his lab monkeys. Surprisingly, it worked, and he ended up creating his own team of super apes, made up of a gorilla, a baboon, and an orangutan. The same one Reed ends up kicking away. But just so we don't say the Red Ghost doesn't show up in the movie, he does. In the final scenes, we actually see an animated sequence featuring him and his group of superpowered apes. If you also love movies, series, and cartoons, go ahead and click that subscribe button right now. When Ben, better known as the Thing, is back in his old neighborhood lifting a car to impress a bunch of kids, if you look closely, you'll notice a Star of David on the gate behind them. That's likely a nod to the fact that Ben is Jewish in the comics. Not many people noticed this, but shortly after the scene with the Green Beetle, you can spot a store called Stanley right behind Ben. That's clearly a tribute to one of the greatest creative minds in comic book history, Stan Lee, the legendary creator behind Spider-Man, Iron Man, Thor, the X-Men, and of course the Fantastic Four, was actually born Stanley Martin Lieber. He chose the pen name Stan Lee because back in the 1940s, being a comic book writer wasn't seen as something to be proud of. But I think it's fair to say, on behalf of every Marvel fan out there, thank you, Stan Lee. And as if that tribute to the comic book master wasn't already cool enough, there's an even bigger one. Right when the anomaly caused by the Silver Surfer begins to appear in the sky, we see 2 men looking up at the strange phenomenon. Those 2 guys are none other than Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. the duo responsible for creating some of the most iconic superheroes in Marvel history. You can even spot the name of the company they're working at, Timely Comics, which was the original name of Marvel back in the day. If you look closely, you can even see the company logo on the wall behind the two men. And there's more. You can also spot references to some of the old sci-fi stories created by these two comic book legends. One of them is about a character named Oog, an alien who ends up trapped on Earth for centuries under the ice. And that's not the only Timely Comics reference. Later on, when the Fantastic Four are about to teleport Galactus, or so they think, we can spot a comic book company sign behind Mr. Fantastic. It's probably the same one where we saw Jack Kirby and Stan Lee earlier. Speaking of Jack, Stan Lee's greatest creative partner of all time, we see another reference to this genius right at the beginning of the movie. We're told the story takes place on Earth 828. You might be wondering, so what? Well, to manage their different versions of the same characters, Marvel came up with the idea of multiple dimensions in the comics. A clever way to reboot a hero's story whenever they wanted and, of course, sell more issues. The most famous one is Earth 616, where the main storylines happen. Meanwhile, the MCU we all know officially takes place in Earth 199999. So then, what's Earth 828? Well, before the Fantastic Four movie, it didn't exist. Which explains perfectly how Robert Downey Jr. can now appear as Victor Von Doom, without causing any timeline issues. But here's the thing. 828 is actually a tribute to Jack Kirby's birthday, August 28th, the 8th month and the 28th day. Such a great way to honor the legend. When the group of heroes is introduced on television, the network covering the event is none other than ABC. And yep, ABC is part of the Disney family. Coincidence? I don't think so. Right, Mickey? Back to some 1960s references. When the Fantastic Four show up on TV, their introduction looks a lot like the first time the Beatles performed in the US. Seriously, the resemblance is uncanny. That moment is also a callback to the joke Doctor Strange made about Mr. Fantastic in the not-so-great Multiverse of Madness, where he confuses the Fantastic Four with the Beatles. That's because the iconic British band was also known as the Fab Four.
Reed Richards of the Fantastic Four.
And since we brought up Doctor Strange 2, a movie that honestly is only slightly better than the Marvels, there's another cool nod to a major character, Wanda Maximoff. When the Silver Surfer is giving his apocalyptic speech, you can spot the word Westview in the background. This is a direct reference from director Matt Shakman to WandaVision, the Disney Plus series he directed himself. In the show, Westview was the name of the fictional town Wanda magically created. And of course, we've got to mention Herbie, the tiny robot Reed created as the team's assistant, and later as the nanny of little Franklin Richards. Herbie's a real character, but he wasn't originally from the comics. He debuted in the old Hanna-Barbera animated series we talked about earlier. For a while, he even replaced the Human Torch on the team, and eventually he did make his way into the comics. Fun fact, Herbie actually made a cameo in the 2005 movie as an Easter egg, but his design looked so goofy that it got cut from the final version. That's all for now, but if you're a fan of everything pop culture just like we are, check out the two videos on your screen right now. Click on either one. They're both awesome and you're gonna love them.